I wanted to defend my country, period. You know, my Australia was being threatened up the north there. This was in 42. And I just felt it was my duty to do it, yeah. Apart from the fact that I liked flying and, you know, but my main reason was to defend my country, of course, yeah.
Well, I joined, I'm quite small and I didn't want to get in among those rough blokes, and I looked at all the Army, Navy and Air Force, and I didn't want to get dirty, so I joined the Air Force. That was the biggest mistake I made.
Did you get a shock?
Yes.
I bet you did, yeah.
A big one. Particularly when you do unarmed training in Brickley Bay.
Unarmed training? What's all that about?
Unarmed, yes. And you had to crawl along.
Oh, that's right, yes.
Crawl along a muddy track, which by now was mud, and barbed wire ahead.
That's right.
And they're firing shots over you. I didn't know they were expert shots, but frightened the hell out of me. And you couldn't put your backside up, you got caught on the wire. But when you got to the end, you dived out and you ran to a creek, and there was a rope hanging up. And you're supposed to grab the rope and swing across the creek. But everybody had fallen in, and the rope was covered with mud. You slipped right down there. It wasn't a very pleasant experience, believe me. On the first time I was on Compagnie, and one of the gunners said, "Oh, look, Skipper, there's flak, let's get closer and see what it's like." So we did, and one burst of light alongside us and ripped all the fabric off the side. Oh, gee, it was cold. But we never deliberately went near the flak after that.
But yeah, they were flimsy, weren't they, those Wimpies?
Yeah.
You know, it was just fabric, wasn't it?
Oh, just fabric.
It wasn't armour-plated steel.
Oh, no. But the framework was that... they were very strong, really. The trouble is, if you went over 10,000 feet, you had to have the oxygen.
Mm.
And in the Wimpy, you had to go and pump oil every half hour. And you used to carry a bottle of oxygen with you. And if you dropped it, you were in trouble.
I'm a bit of a coward, I suppose. I had a lovely little chair in the Wallace operator, seats heated behind there was the pilot, the navigator, and then us. And we had a little compartment with a little window, which was wonderful, and you could look out and you know, if things got a bit rough down there and it was, you know, looked horrible, I'd just pull the curtain. You see. Used you ever to do that?
No.
Did you look out the whole time?
I got up in the Astrodome to have a good view.
Oh no. I was on the radio to see if there was any urgent message.
I had it with me.
Yeah.
But then it was damn cold up there. We had the heat coming off the port engine, but it came right in alongside of me.
That's right.
And I was boiling on that side and freezing on that side, you know.
So, what did you do?
Ship bumped.
Yeah, you turned it down, didn't you? Yeah. And the poor pilot up the front would complain. Yeah, he wasn't getting any heat. Yeah.
The poor gunners there, they didn't have that. They had...
they had plug-in suits.
Yeah, they had like electric blankets in the suits were. There was up near the Flushing Island, opposite Antwerp, and it's below sea level, and round it is the big dike. On the dike was the German gun emplacement, and they were shelling Antwerp. We had to go and put an end to it. So there were 25 planes. We were the leading plane, and the instructions given to the bomb aimer was if the flak was not too bad, he was to drop a siding bomb for accuracy. Anyhow, he dropped it, and that woke all the Germans up. They started firing hell. So the other 24 planes dropped their load and got to hell out of it. We had to go around in a big circle and come in again. Well, I was up in the Astrodome, and you could see the fire coming closer and closer. At last, it hit the tail, knocked half the tail off, and knocked the gun as well. To all the hydraulics and that, and the wheels were hanging down, and the flaps were down, and the pilot, Bill, he nursed that plane right back there. We were nearly an hour late getting back, and when you get back to England, there's only two places you can cross the coast, and you have to have the code to get in. Well, we were so late that the code had changed, so they wouldn't let us in. And they sent up 2 fighters and escorted us in, so that's how we got back. But we lost a little English black who was dreamy, and he was a lovely fellow. He was only 19, so it was terrible. But anyhow, that was how it happened.
On our 12th trip, first time we'd been to Germany, we went to a place called Gelsenkirchen, and very successfully we thought we dropped our bombs, and coming home one Ju-88 attacked us, and our rear gunner carried out his job beautifully. He told us to dive to port and dive to starboard and corkscrew and all this. And anyway, we got rid of this plane. It didn't get us. And so we're all uptight, I suppose, about the fact that it was the first time we'd ever seen an enemy aircraft so close. Anyway, we landed, or we were about to land, and we hit the ground with the 2 front wheels, and the back one, I don't know what happened, but the tail wheel came off or something, and the plane just went doing in halves on the runway. And of course, the poor old rear gunner, I think he was so excited, having done such a good job, got out of was getting out of his turret as we landed, and his head hit the handles and killed him.
First time I ever saw a jet plane was in Germany, near Berlin, and we thought it was a plane with its tail on fire. Because a big sheet of flame used to come out. Anyhow, coming straight at us, and Bill and the engineer pushed forward, and we dived. We were floating, and then they had tried to pull it out because we still had the big ladder. And the navigator and as the engineer and the pilot both eventually got it out, we continued on and dropped our bombs. But it was terribly windy, so couldn't make out. And the engineer pulled down the navigator's curtain. They had a blackout curtain, and he was sitting on that, and at last he stood up. He said his bum was cold. So he stood up and he said, "Hey, skipper," he said, "I'm outside." What do you mean outside? We'd blown the top off the thing and we were getting the full draft right through.
You lost the canopy, did you?
Yeah.
Or the
We came
ceiling,
right.
yeah.
Oh, dear, it was cold. It was always hard to land those planes. They were only bomb carriers, nothing else, you know. They were a remarkable plane, but...
But what you say is it was very clever of the pilot to get that plane down, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Eh? Yeah.
Oh, when we come into fog, trying to land, you couldn't see. And the only thing that would shine up was the Fido, the kerosene flares right down. And you couldn't see those, but it used to put a glow. And you tried to come down, and the heat of the kerosene used to send you up, so you come down.
Oh, you probably don't understand that, but this kerosene was light on the side of the runway, and of course if fog was there or something and you couldn't see, in order to mark out the runway, these lights would come on, kerosene flames, weren't they?
Yeah.
Mm.
It used to send up a heat, and you're trying to come down, and it's pushing you up.
We must have had 14,000 pounds of bombs on board, including a big one, I guess, and we couldn't see a ruddy thing. All we could see on the radar was lots of little blips, and these were ships, boats. Anything on the water showed up, you see, and it was a mess, an absolute mess. And we had pathfinders. They were the men who came in first, dropped their markers, and they would tell the rest of the bombers to bomb a certain coloured light, and we would do that. And anyway, we dropped our bombs and on these lights, which we were told to do, and we couldn't see what was below. And it wasn't until we were coming home that across the channel that we saw visually all these bips, and they were boats, you see. And when we got back, we were told we were the first to bomb on D-Day, and that was quite interesting. And then again that night we went on another one and did the same thing.
We had to go diversionary plans. We went up north of D-Day and made ourselves as nuisance as we could to draw all the fighters and German attention away from what was happening. And so we were quite excited about the whole thing.
Mm.
From the air, we could see in the distance all the watercraft there. It was amazing. And then there was 1,050 planes went over there afterwards.
That must have been a sight. Yeah.
Oh,
of course you'd seen them before, but not the number.
Hours for them to go through. All the planes, and then these huge gliders.
Yeah.
They used to carry a couple of hundred men, or about 3 tanks, and they used to let them go, and where they landed was it. I wouldn't like to have been in them, but they were only made of plywood.
Yeah. They tell me on the continent there, you know, as the men, the troops were assembling and going along, there were hundreds of these just left there, you know, and they were strange things. If they were lucky enough to land at a drome, of course, that they would come in and stop, no running along. It looked very strange. Mm. On our 20th trip, we went to a place right on the far eastern side of France, on the German border. And coming back, we out of the blue came two fighters, apparently, which we didn't see. And they came from underneath, up front, I guess, because none of our gunners could see them. And next thing, as far as I was concerned, I was sitting there waiting for a message, and there was this awful noise, and I could see bullet holes next to me, and there was flame. And we carry a thing called a target indicator, I think it was called, about that size, and it issued smoke, and it was for dropping, and the navigator would take a bearing from the smoke. Well, that got hit in the plane, and there was just a mess, you know. Next thing, the pilot said abandon, and anyway, I could see our rear gunner, our upper gunner there, and I tried to get him out. I couldn't. He must have been hit in this. We had several attacks, and there was no response from the rear gunner, so we thought he must have got hit too. So the plane was on fire, and very fast fire it seemed, because we had no engines at all. On the first attack we lost 2 engines, and then on the second we lost the other 2. So here we were with 4 engines on fire. What does one do? Well, the pilot said abandon ship, and so we did. And that was it. I jumped out and lost a shoe on the way down, and just landed in a forest in the middle of France. I was shot down, and during the night of the day, I just stayed in this forest or walked a short distance from it, with fields all the way around, and a couple of tracks which crossed, and I saw some men riding their bicycle along one track, and they looked like farm workers, and I took a chance and said, yes, they're farm workers. So I walked along the track, and they were met by more farm workers who were coming on another track which crossed, and there we were in a bunch down here, about 10 of us, I suppose. And I just said, où est la Pyrenees? And I thought I'd walk to the Pyrenees. And I said, which way? And they said, this way, this way, this way, this way. No. And I said, how many kilometres the Pyrenees? And they said, 600. And I said, thank you very much. And nobody offered any assistance. So I said, merci, thank you, bon voyage, and off I went for the 600 k's to the Pyrenees. Well, I suppose I went about 1 kilometre, and this is out in the country, way out in the country. And suddenly I met 2 ladies, and they were at a farm, and I went in, and they said, come in. I took a chance, I really did. And they were friendly, you know, because sometimes we had, what do they call those people? Informers out there all over France, you know. There were spies and things. But anyway, I took a chance, and they said, come in. I stayed there, and they said, look, we're going, they put me in a loft. They said, we'll get some assistance. So they did some homework there and rang and carried on. And they said, a bloke will come here and take you to a forest which is safe, and the plane will come from England and take you back. I thought, fair enough, this sounds really good. And anyway, during the night, a bloke arrived on a cycle, and he said, follow me. I haven't told you yet, or did I tell you about my shoe? I lost a shoe on the way down. And they got me this great big size 19, whatever it was, and I put it on, and I had to walk, and of course I got the cramp in the groin, but that was all right. I had to walk all night, and they said, we're taking you to this place where you're going to get help. And they took me to this castle, and where I met the underground people, the resistance, yeah. And, the bloodthirsty looking men, they were dreadful, really. Beards and swords and everything. Anyway, I was a bit scared, but they gave us something to eat, and there was another guy there who said, "Come on, I'm taking you to safety." Two members of my crew had been rescued by the resistance, so they came to this castle too, and this bloke said, "Look, I will go ahead on my bicycle, and you three come along." Well, the three of us went along, and fortunately my other two friends helped me because I couldn't walk. And we didn't see anyone. Oh, we saw two soldiers, that's right. And we just passed them, sort of said, "How do you do? This is out in the country, very strange." And they said, "We're going to take you to safety." Oh, it's marvellous there. And anyway, they took us to a railway station, a little railway station, Fontainebleau or something. And there we met a bloke who spoke English. And here he was sitting at a radio. And he was the resistance leader for the area. And it was absolutely amazing. We couldn't get over it. And he said, "Oh, it's a good camp. We've got a chef from Paris there, and he does all the cooking, and it's really nice." And he said, in a short time, a little aircraft will come over and take you back two by two. Anyway, we got into the centre of this forest, and there we met other men who'd been there for some little time. And we told them that what was said, and they said, "Yes, bull." It never happened. And I was in the forest for nearly 2 months, and we had droppages. England knew we were there, intelligence, and they would arrange droppages from an aircraft. They would drop some food and that sort of stuff, and clothes. Was very, very strange. The first droppage we had from an aircraft was, what would you expect? Food. I would have expected food. Remember, this is from England. Lice powder. Can you imagine? Here we were waiting for a lovely meal, and we get lice bloody powder. Well, England expects every man to be clean and healthy, and what better than lice powder to keep you that way. We had several droppages, but they were mainly just clothes, because most of us were in our uniforms still, and they dropped trousers and stuff like this, But relief never came until the Americans came up from the south of France in the Second Front, and they rescued us on the 14th of August, I think it was, 1944, and we were taken back to the Channel ports to go back to England on trucks and things. During which time there were 2 trucks, and we were going back. And anyway, they were driven by black men, Negroes, sorry. And they drove very fast, and they went around a bend, the first truck, and all these men who were similar to me, evaders, were thrown out. Every one of them. They finished up in a paddock. One bloke had his bottle of champagne, and it didn't break. Yeah. Anyway, no one was injured. It was absolutely amazing, because there would have been 20 of them, all went out of this big truck. Anyway, we went back to... we stayed at a POW camp, and I've never seen so many men in my life. There were thousands, I think about 60,000 or something, captured on the peninsula there, and they were all in big paddocks, and all the men were here, and the officers all up in a corner together, which I thought was very strange. Anyway, from there we went back to Bayeux, and they centre, or they had a Dakota, and we were taken back to England and interpreted there. I couldn't give them much information, you know. I felt dreadful. Here I was. I'd been over to France, and we were. The war was going on over there, and I had no helpful information about troop movements or anything. I hadn't even seen a troop, you know.